last week we were looking at new romantics, we were looking at people with synthesizers, and now we're jumping across the Atlantic to look at hip hop. Do you think there was any link between the new romantics and early hip hop?
I feel like yes, but only because you asked the question. I'm just trying to think of reason.
Yeah, and that's a great answer. I think you're trying to say something, so why don't you say it? Back to Metro. There was one album where a black band in the States tried to become new romantics. And if you get a chance, I know you're busy, if you get a chance, it's well worth listening to because it's one of the worst albums ever made. It's by a group that you know called the Village People. And they decided, the new romantics in England, they're talking about the past, they're talking about Greeks and Romans and bodies, and it's music you can dance to. And they did an album called Renaissance. And please, if you ever feel that the music you like isn't the greatest in the world, listen to Renaissance by the Village People. But the other big link is that a lot of the early hip-hop artists were what I would classify as electronica. They were using electronic instruments. They were innovators, they were pioneers, and they were absolutely listening to Gary Newman. They were listening to Kraftwerk. And the samples, if you go back to early hip-hop and you see what's been sampled, there's a load of European and British synthesizing music. So hip-hop, I touch it like an orange background and with a couple of colours. So that's the theme. That's the hip-hop theme. But if you're just taking one note, please write down everything on this slide. The two words there. Hypnus sells. All the time you're surrounded by companies who are trying to shift their products to you. It's how capitalism works. You buy, you sell, or as Joe Strummer said, you make, you buy, you die. You know, so we're all consumers. And businesses keep looking at ways to find your money. So they find what your interests are. They'll collect your cookies online, they know all of your preferences, and then they'll tailor-made what they sell to appeal to you. So Hypnus sells, that's absolutely the theme throughout this talk about hip-hop. Do you know that shop? Gap. Okay, so you know Gap. And Gap is a brilliant example of Hypnus selling. Of how do I attract cool people to my brand? And Gap has a really interesting part to play in hip-hop history. I went digging for it and I found this. 3 tons of Levi's. And I think this is the first ever ad when they only had one shop. If you're trying to appeal to young people, to counterculture, to subculture, what a great place to start your business in 1969, San Francisco. It's the epicenter of the hippie movement. It's the epicenter of young people looking for something new, looking to live a life that their parents never ever imagined. There it is, closer. And that's what the ad said. The Bay Area's wildest selection and biggest. Over 12,000 pairs, 32 styles, 3,700 sizes, neat hopster flares, good-looking jags, and trim cuts, smart Mr. Levi's slacks, all of them. Levi's star press slacks. No matter what your shape, the Gap's got you covered. Have a fit, fall into the Gap. It's the store for Levi's. Why did they pick a name like the Gap for a clothes shop that's lasted for 50 years and has been hugely successful? Gap
in the market for the kind of clothes that these young people wanted?
Love that idea. Yeah, there was a gap. And those young people who wanted to buy jeans and patches and sunshiny robes, where did another social gap exist for those young people? Older people. And what do we call that? The generation gap. So it was really, really smart, a way to tap into young people and their sense of we're different. Now, this idea had been tried before. They did a deal with Levi's. In fact, Levi's helped them financially. And the deal was, we want every single type of jean in every single size in stock all the time. So as soon as they sold one, Levi's delivered that replica the next day. It had been done with shoes before, and it's you knew if you needed a particular size, a particular design, you knew that there was only one store in America that guaranteed that they had your size and the ones that you wanted. The other really interesting thing, what else did they sell? What did those little circles look like? Thank you, they look kind of like records. Would that make sense with a hip counterculture 1960s shop? And there's the next ad. And just look at the bottom. And it's the Gap, Levi's records and tapes. So they only sell 3 things. And 2 of them are from the music industry. So from the day it was born, the Gap looked to youth culture, it looked to cool people, it looked to young people who were making visual statements. That's the second ad. And I think these are the first 2 ads that they ever took out. And then here's a cartoon called The Generation Gap from the same era. And you've got a young guy and an older man. And it looks like they're getting ready to paint a room. He's got the paint bucket and he's got the brush. And the young guy's saying, I didn't think we needed to spread papers around in the first place, but you insisted. So I did it. Now what? Because the old guy is picking up some of the newspapers. And the old guy says, I'm just weeding out the comic and sports pages. I'm not worried about you being interested in anything else in the paper. We're starting this as a 2-man operation, and I'm making sure it stays that way. Here's the context. The old guy is saying, I don't trust young people with a newspaper, and there are only 2 things that you would read because you're very, very limited in your interests. So there's the generation gap. The older people read everything in the newspaper, including the news. The young people, they're just read comics and the sports. So there's a real wedge being divided. What do you think that is? We know it's the Gap logo, we know it's their font. The Americans would call it YZY, we call it YZY. Maybe instead of reading it, if you say it to yourself. Yeezy.
Oh, Yeezy, like the shoes?
No. Yeezy like the artist. And here's I want you to imagine the size of this. This is an entire wall of a city building in Chicago, and down at the back you've got YZY and Yeezy, the full name being written. So the Gap and Yeezy had a very, very, very happy relationship for a while, and then it didn't go that well. But all the time the Gap, up to now, is looking for young people, young artists to do business with, to make them look hip, to make them look cool. The Gap also knows it also owns Banana Republic and Old Navy. Do you know those? Yeah, okay, so the Gap isn't just the Gap. And you tend to see that with really, really big companies. They'll have a signature brand, but they'll also own often huge other brands as well. For stores, we saw San Francisco, 69, only 3 products, records, tapes, and Levi's jeans. There's a more recent one. Who were they? Do you recognise them? Fantastic. There's the generation gap. Naomi Campbell, Madonna, and Missy Elliott. So this is clearly more recent than 1969, and the Gap is constantly trying to form alliances with people who appeal to young people. Go back a little bit before this, and there's Paul Simonon from The Clash. And no one represented anti-authoritarian ideals on records more to me when I was growing up than The Clash. And then I found Paul Simonon in a Gap ad, and I was kind of crushed. So they would put photos, now it's an incredibly brilliant photograph. So if you're going to be in a Gap ad, I guarantee you, you're going to look the best you've ever looked. Because they'll get the best photographers in the world to take the photos. And then they'll put a bit of type in that makes it look like you're cool and the Gap is cool because they're your mate. And all they've done is give you a load of money and ask for a day for you to be there to get your photo taken. Here's another one, you don't know her, but right now her name is Betty Boo. So this is disco. This is club music. This is an international superstar. And again, they've got the type of text that they think will appeal to people who like Betty Boo. Revel. It's the frenzy and the thrill you spark, the spin you put on everything you touch. Pure Gap for individuals who show cause. Now keep in mind, this is a shop that sells mass-produced fashion. But they're trying to say individuals love our stuff. So it's a brilliant piece of strategy. Just a bit of background revenue. Last year, 15.1 billion. Now the entire Irish economy, including every worker and every multinational, every Irish company, is about 175 billion. So for one shop selling jeans, and at the start tapes and records, 82,000 employees and over 3,500 shops. So this is a mega business that keeps on making alliances with young, fresh faces who are generally pop stars. And there's an ad. If I had a link, I would show you that, but I'll upload the lecture, and I almost would prefer that you watched it on your own than all of us watching together. But write down the name LL Cool J. Cool J. LL Cool J. I don't think you know LL Cool J. Okay, some of the scholars of hip hop do, but your parents, your grandparents might know LL Cool J. What does the name stand for? Ladies love Cool J's. So you see that a lot in hip hop, as you saw it with punk, people changing their names to be more in line with the music, with the brand, with the lifestyle. And here's an illustration. Another logo, another corporate logo. Please write down FUBU. If you lived in New York, you might know this brand, especially if you lived there in the later 90s into the 2000s. Does anyone know FUBU? Great. So let's see what they're all about. And here are some people modelling FUBU. If I was a bit more organised, I would have had a merch stall down the back, selling this stuff. How would you describe that? What do you think? What does that represent? What are they communicating with their clothes? What do you notice?
Kind of has a minimalist look with its typography.
Yeah, quite minimalist. Like it's a bold statement, but there's nothing fancy. It's not a signature, not a handwritten one. It's in your face, which is very suitable for streetwear, for hip hop.
Yeah, I was going to say, it kind of streetish because it sort of matches the graffiti on the back of the wall, at least in terms of colours and sort of designs on them. Sort of, it's like they fit in if they were walking past any sort of graffiti
It's streetwear. Where do you take the photos of them? On the street with graffiti behind them. And graffiti was it was important to punk, but it was incredibly important to hip hop. Graffiti to punk was generally just a spray can. Some of you will have seen graffiti in Avril Lavigne's Skater Boy video. And that was a brilliant piece of positioning because it was saying, hey, I'm kind of punk, I'm badass. And there were loads of symbols of punk rock in there with photocopied flyers and young people telling each other about the gig and avoiding mainstream advertising. The other thing I want you to notice, I think you've seen it already, the guy in the middle looks like a DHL package. Really bright, really, really colourful. This was not meant to be camouflage. This was you making a statement. Look at me. I want all eyes on me. There's another one of the jackets, the satin. Another one, you could see the casual streetwear coming in as well as the ultra stylish stuff. And then there's LL Cool J. He's got the FUBU cap. He's got the F on his jumper. And he's part of the FUBU collection. Plain white tees. Thank you to all the models in the class today who brought in their plain white tees. Absolutely essential to streetwear and to the early hip hop look. Really big baggy white t-shirts. Are they incredibly expensive? Do you go to the Gap to buy them? Absolutely not. And for any of you who are thinking of investing in t-shirts, here's the current price. If you're buying over 100 from China, they're under $3.94. So under £4, how much does a white t-shirt sell for the shop?
Pennies would be like €2.50.
$2.50.
In pennies, yeah. But
So how are pennies selling them cheaper than the wholesaler in China? How can pennies do that?
Because it's the way they like make the shirts. So they made it says like made in Bangladesh. So it could be like labor and stuff like that
Yeah.
as well.
But do you think that these are better t-shirts? Or worse?
Just depends really.
So here's the key. It's all about how many are pennies buying. So pennies would be buying hundreds of thousands, perhaps. Or pennies and their associated retailers, and that drives the price down. But this is you. If you wanted to buy a t-shirt and you spray painted it, you'd probably make a decent profit. Here's Diamond John. And to me, I love hip hop. But you know more about hip hop than I do. Because you're living it. You're listening to it all the time. I'm listening to a range of music, but I did go to the first ever gangster rap performance in Ireland. First time a gangster rapper appeared on stage, I was there. And I thought, this is dangerous and weird and funny and cool, and I want more of that, please. But the way I got into hip hop was through punk, through new wave. Because a lot of those people were very, very open to what was going on in the streets in New York, and you had very, very early collaborations between the Clash. They brought a guy called Futura on tour with them. He was a graffiti artist from New York, and he would spray paint the background, the backdrop during the gig. So by the end of the gig, you had this graffiti piece of art that didn't exist at the start. He became part of their show. The Sex Pistols, John Lydon, does an incredibly, like a really potent, powerful song called World Destruction with Africa Bambaataa, who's one of the early pioneers of hip hop. Blondie, the first time rap is a hit in the States, is the whitest of white groups. They're so white, she's blonde, her hair. But they're totally aware of hip hop and they love it and they want to encourage it, they want to help it develop. But hip hop was completely underground at the start. And here's Diamond John. Diamond John was raised in the Hollis neighbourhood of Queens. He didn't come from a family with money. Parents divorced when he was 10 years old, and he never saw his father again. And he said, we went from middle class, when the father left, to poor. I became the man of the house and started working at that age, and that age is 10. So a lot of hip-hop refers to people out on the streets, hustling, doing various transactions. You know what a lot of those transactions are. But then there's a whole load of people who are trying to make a living so that they can eat. And Diamond John is one of those people. He's 10. How do you start your first business? You're not going to get the Bank of Ireland saying, hey, we're looking for 10-year-old future entrepreneurs who happen to be black. That's absolutely not happening. And he said, you remembered, initially it was through printed t-shirts, but not my own brand. So he was selling t-shirts that someone else had designed. But then I went and printed up some shirts when the Rodney King riots were happening in Los Angeles, with lines like, what happened to poor Rodney King? So this guy is on the street trying to make money. He's selling t-shirts. That's good. What's even better? Sell your own t-shirts, your own design. What's he doing? He's doing what the Gap are trying to do, which is tapping into what's happening on the street. So after Rodney King was killed, he thought, I'm going to do t-shirts. And people wanted to wear those t-shirts because they were making a statement. Then Mike Tyson got incarcerated. So Mike Tyson goes to jail. I'm not going into it. Look it up. So we did free Mike Tyson shirts. You're on the street. You don't have a shop window. You are the shop window. And people like them. We would sell them at events and on street corners. It showed me something about the reason people buy clothes. When there's an emotional slogan or an emotional connection, products sell quicker. If any of you are going into business, if any of you are looking for a way to get attention, those last three little lines there. It's not even a full sentence. That's the whole key to business, right there. And this guy learns it on the street from the age of 10, because he has to support his family. I don't know, has anyone seen a box set called The Wire? Okay, some of you have, and there's a guy called Bubs in there, and all he does is go around selling white t-shirts. You know, so that tradition is carried on. RS. Now I've put in RS on a few slides. Russell Simmons, some of the hip-hop scholars, you've heard of his name. I'm not going into it actually, but I'm just going to say I believe all the women who made accusations against him. So he went from being one of the most successful business people in hip-hop, who then became arguably one of the most successful business people in America, period. One of the most well-connected, influential, to being someone who doesn't have a reputation. Born in 1957, on the week that Elvis's Loving You movie soundtrack was moved from #1 by the soundtrack from around the world in 80 days. Now, if you know the Public Enemy song, Fight the Power, there's a very, very strong line in that where Chuck D from Public Enemy talks about how Elvis means, he says a rude word about Elvis, and that Elvis doesn't mean anything to the black community, that Elvis was a racist. So the context here is, when did black people in America get the vote? When did they get equal rights? The world is in flux in the 1960s, and this guy, who becomes one of the pioneer business people of hip-hop, is born in the 50s. So he's seen what's going on, and he's seen white culture is what goes to #1 on the Billboard charts. But he gets really lucky, because his young brother loves hip-hop. His young brother is called Run, and he forms Run DMC in their Hollis neighbourhood. That's a really good thing if you're a manager. If your brother happens to be a future superstar. That's the absolute best thing that can happen. And now we're going to look at the 3 pioneers of early hip hop. Because hip hop, it's almost impossible to imagine a world without hip hop. But there was a world without hip hop. And these 3 individuals are credited. Now, there were other people doing interesting things, but these 3 are seen as the founding innovators of what became commercial hip hop. There's Kool Herc, he's got the headphones on, he's got the machine behind him. He looks like he's in a record shop. Now, when I was choosing my outfit for today, I was, going through my wardrobe, looking at the range, and I thought I could wear my blue fur jacket, or I would get everyone's attention if I did a full Africa Bambaataa. He's dressed to get your attention. Did any black artist before hip hop dress to get your attention?
Some did. People like David Bowie and stuff like that.
Yeah, but black artists who dressed to grab your attention. Parliament, Funkadelic, Sly Stone, James Brown, the Motown acts. None of them went out looking like they were going to the pub. So it's been incredibly important in black culture. But this, he took it to a new level. This is the mothership gone to Mars. And they're Grandmaster Flash. And the first time I heard hip hop, I was in London, and a record shop was playing the Grandmaster Flash single, and I thought the world had stopped. Like, I really thought, this is the sound of the apocalypse. This is scarier than punk, and you can dance to it. And it's technically brilliant. So there are the 3 innovators of early hip hop. 3 pioneers. This is from Alex Ogg's brilliant book about hip hop. It took many elements and a serious amount of low resource innovation to bring hip hop to the mainstream. Kool Herc, Africa Bambaataa, and Grandmaster Flash are rightly given credit for being there at the start. Kool Herc is from Jamaica. And if you go to Jamaica, you're going to hear the music, because they've got fantastic speakers. And they're homemade speakers. And he went to New York and he thought, these aren't as good as we have in Jamaica. So he started building equipment. And if you have equipment and you have good records, you've got all you need for a party.
Would reggae have been kind of around this time as well, or?
Yeah, really important. Reggae's around before hip hop. And to me, it's impossible to imagine the sound of hip hop if reggae hadn't existed. In reggae, there's something called toasting. That's not your toasting. But it's where the DJ speaks over the record. And he might be saying, I'm the greatest guy in Kingston. We know that that then becomes one of the essential ingredients in hip hop. Saying how great you are. Getting the crowd on your side. Whipping up the dancers. Russell Simmons, he's living in Queens, which is close to the epicenter of this revolutionary youth culture of hip hop. While he was attending a sociology course, he met a guy called Rudy Toppin. And Rudy Toppin was running very, very early hip hop events in New York. And he said that this guy, who seemed really bright, he seemed like he wanted to do business, he seemed like he knew his music, and said, will you help me promote my gigs? And now Russell Simmons is in the hip hop business. Now I want you to remember the last slide, and there's a key phrase on it, low resource. So the innovation that was done with no money was with very little money. Russell Simmons didn't get the job because he went for the interview. It was all done through a very small underground network because this music was not popular. This music was not part of the mainstream music industry at all. Russell Simmons, how to start a business, his mother gave him $2,000. That's the same thing that happened with Motown. With Berry Gordy, there was the family who lent him his money to start. So sometimes black entrepreneurs, they wouldn't have been part of the mainstream financial institutions, so they depended on their own community resources. And soon, this young guy became the best promoter of hip-hop gigs. It's in New York, but New York's the epicenter. He's a promoter, but he wanted more. And by 1979, when punk is morphing into post-punk and all of these fabulous possibilities, Russell Simmons wants to be an artist manager too. And Billboard magazine started writing about this young guy who only got into the business because someone got talking to him at college. Now, Russell Simmons might have been a student, but he understood the power of branding, just like the Gap did from 1969 on. And the quote in Billboard in 79 is, if people enjoy the crowd and the music at your event, they tell their friends. And pretty soon you have a following for everything you do. Now there's a word for that, there's a phrase for that. I think you know it. You're not paying for advertising. Yeah, absolutely, but the phrase is WOM, word of mouth. And it's still one of the main ways that people hear about their favourite new music. It's through someone telling you. Your friend knows what type of music you like, they discover something new. So word of mouth, even though you're surrounded by influencers, you're surrounded by people bombarding you with ads, and yet it's still that human contact is an incredibly important threshold into new music. This is really interesting. So he's managing bands, he's promoting hip hop, and when the artists go to record, he thinks, who will buy this? I know, the new wave people. They're white. So he's not targeting the black community initially. Why do you think that is?
White people stereotypically have more money.
Yeah. The white new wavers who were going to clubs, going to gigs, had more disposable income than the average black family. So it was a really interesting business move. Run DMC's, it's like that, and Houdini's The Haunted House of Rock. Now, I think you know Run DMC, but I think you don't know Houdini. So if you get a chance, please sometime listen to Houdini. And I would put Houdini up there with bands like Trouble Funk. You know, this was incredibly powerful, interesting music to dance to, but there was more going on to it than just dancing. And they were aiming for a crossover. And Simmons made a valid point about the rebellious roots of black rhythm and blues music. He said the newer rap artists have more in common musically with rock and roll than any commercial R&B since the days when R&B was rock and roll. So R&B, rhythm and blues, has become a term for soul music, for black pop music. People on the fringes of disco, certainly funk. And to appeal to the new wave crowd, Russell Simmons say, I know they're black, cool, urban, and different, but this is like the early rock and roll. So if you like punk, if you like new wave, you should check this stuff out. It's a really great vision for how to cross over the artist. When he wrote his autobiography, there's only one name on his book cover, and it's Donald Trump. And I found that very, very interesting. This black entrepreneur, one of the pioneers of hip hop, one of the most successful business people of hip hop, and he doesn't quote, there's no quote from Jay-Z, there's no quote from any black superstar, it's from Donald Trump. And Donald Trump says it's a great book. Russell Simmons' book is great, but so is my book. So it's this fabulous piece of co-branding. And it's just an example that hip-hop is often on the lookout for commercial friends, for business friends, for political friends. You know, it's fighting its corner. And Simmons emphasised the mutual promotion. In his book, he explained, Trump has been very influential in helping me to expand my vision. Sometimes I talk to Donald 2 or 3 times a day, and he's taught me many things. Why would he have that in his book and on the cover of his book? That's because it kind of was legitimising him. I know this guy who's a really famous entrepreneur. Simmons was a major force in turning hip-hop from a small niche to big business. By the year 2000, I love this statistic, 13% of all music that was sold in America was hip-hop. Like a genre that, in terms of the long span of time, was incredibly new. 2022, 28.7% of all music streamed in the US was either hip-hop or R&B. Black music had taken over. And now, I imagine it's higher because hip-hop has gone into every other genre and it's made friends with it. Can you think of any Irish groups that have drawn on hip-hop? Nika. And do you think in Hollis, in Queens, when hip-hop was being discovered and nurtured, that they thought someday a bunch of lads from the north will be rapping in Irish? So it's gone to extraordinary places that wouldn't have been imagined at the start. It's a global piece of culture. Yeah. Now, yeah. How do you like that photo? It's the dictionary definition of cool. Now, I had to search around because I wanted a photo where you've got the parting in the hair, because I think that really is incredibly cool. And this is where hip-hop becomes commercial. And this is one of the great accidents in music. Anyone got a guess? But I don't think you know who they are, but I bet most of you, I bet all of you have heard them. They've got the Adidas. There's a little bit of bling even there. There's the gold chain. And this is incredibly early. This is early 80s. Loads of the fashion statements of hip hop are already there and being worn and celebrated. And they're the Sugar Hill Gang. With the hip, with the hop, with the hippity hop. And this is the first global smash from a genre that is completely street until this song takes it to a global audience. And this song was a hit in many, many countries. The Sugar Hill Gang, although their first breakthrough song, Rapper's Delight, was the first major hip-hop hit, to Russell Simmons, it was a novelty. And it didn't represent or enhance the culture of hip-hop. So this came along and it was a huge hit, and Russell Simmons was angry because he thought, that's not proper hip hop. It's a joke. It's a novelty. Some people would say it's up there with Bart Simpson, Do the Bartman. You know, it's funny, it's great, but does it represent street culture? And Russell Simmons really felt that hip hop, even though he was originally trying to appeal to the new wave audience, we've got to keep it street. We've got to keep it real, which has become one of the key phrases in hip hop. And he said, all the black people in the business, in the music business, in the late 70s were true R&B people. They thought R&B was all commercial black music was, or could ever be. So this was Luther Vandross. This was Teddy Prendergast. This was Barry White. It was soul music. And it was known by this time as R&B, rhythm and blues. All of those black entrepreneurs, black industry workers, were in their late 20s or older. And they treated us, the hip hop people, as kids who were just playing at being in the business. So often it can be really hard for young people to get success. You won't be taken seriously. Just like rewind to the guy in the cartoon at the start. Whereas, yeah, young people, you wouldn't know how to read a newspaper, you just read the comics. So you will often get avenues for success, for self-expression, closed off to you by people who are older and see the world in a different way. Russell Simmons, his first client is a guy called Curtis Blow. If you like your hip hop, if you're a scholar of hip hop, please go back. Incredibly talented, incredibly interested, and I guarantee all of the hip hop artists that you like now, they know Curtis Blow. He laid a path for them. He gets signed by a white guy, by an English label, to be the first rapper on a major label, and he's managed by Russell Simmons. So Russell Simmons is right there at the start, on the street, but he's looking at the skyscraper. He's looking at the bank, and he wants to be over on the skyscraper and the bank side, not net, and to keep a foot on the street. Very ambitious. So, yeah, I thought this was funny when I was typing it. So, Russell Simmons in the house, but it's his own house. 1981, he's 24. And he's borrowed money from his mum to start up his business. He's not rolling in it. And he's feeling a lot of pressure. I've got to make money. I'm working really hard. I'm trying. I'm hustling. And thankfully, Run DMC, who he describes as the most important act in hip-hop history. And there's a good case that they were the most important act in the entire history of hip-hop. Because they were there at the start, they revolutionized the sound, they crossed it over with white rock, with a collaboration with Aerosmith, that made Aerosmith much more successful than they were at that moment. So you had with Walk This Way, you had this clash of cultures. And they, as he said, Russell Simmons, they had the talent to reach a wider audience, which they did, we know they did. Run DMC, they didn't film their first video for Rockbox on the street with the graffiti in the project. Instead, they made it in the hottest punk rock club in New York, the Danceteria. So again, you can see him constantly thinking, new wavers, white people who like new wave music and like punk music, they've got the money, we should make our black culture appeal to them. So it's a really, really interesting business vision. Up and down. Before the US companies woke up to the financial benefits of doing business with hip hop, in July 1986, an executive from Europe, Angelo Anastasio, went to a gig in New York. And he goes to see Run DMC in Madison Square Gardens, which is the big concert hall, prestigious. Thousands of people there. And one of our graduates was the head of marketing for it, from arts management side of the equation. And he saw this guy from Europe, he sees Run DMC on stage. They were on their way up, they would get more popular all the time, but Anastasio's company was facing extinction. So this guy's in trouble. His company's in trouble. He's looking for ways to help make his product appeal to people so they can sell enough to make a profit. But they're ready to go out of business. They're ready to go bankrupt, his business. And I think you know the company. I find that really interesting. It's not branded, but I can look at that and I know what brand it is. Anyone? Now there's a hint. 3 stripes. Do you see the 3 grey stripes up there? And there. I don't see any of you wearing those today. But there's the early Adidas. They were track shoes. They were for runners. They were for athletes. They were looking for a way for people to run faster. German company, incredibly smart company. And they went and spoke to people who were doing sports about what type of shoe would you like. So Adidas is formed in 1949, but it becomes crucial to hip hop going mainstream. And once the 3 stripes became official in 49, the 50s became a boom of technology, innovating equipment for world-class athletes. Adidas's, their first decade, delivered a sandbag. Still one of their classic designs. Soccer, football, streetwear were all combined in this ultra cool 3-stripe bag. They also developed the first nylon sole for football boots. And that was really important at the time because it meant footballers could run faster with less tension on their legs. 1949 it's founded, it's been successful, but it's facing an existential crisis in 1986. And I think we've got to do something to get people to think we're cool. And this is what they do. There's Run DMC. Adidas from toe to neck. I was going to say head to toe, but I can't. So it's Adidas from toe up to your neck. And do you know what the hats are? Let's write it down. They're Kangol. So they're Kangol bucket hats. But all of the rest, apart from the jeans, which they could have bought in the Gap, Adidas. There they are. I picked this photo because the last one they're wearing jeans, but this one they've got the full outfit. The full tracky look. That then becomes streetwear and certainly becomes something that you'd identify with casuals in Britain. Lots of people wore this. 1986, it's a key year in hip hop because Adidas does the deal with Run DMC. And Adidas give them $1 million. They're promoting each other. Run DMC have a song called My Adidas. They get people at their gigs to wave, take off their shoes and wave them in the air. So it was a brilliant, brilliant move by a German company that was facing extinction. But I have a problem with this. Because I'm thinking, what's missing from this? Why did this happen? Why was the first big commercial deal done with hip hop, the first huge one, with a German company? Would it not make more sense for an American company to have spotted that opportunity, to have seen it? But there was still a hesitation at this time to do business with the black community. It's very, very rare that a major multinational company would have thought, yeah, let's have black people in our ads, let's target black people with our product and have some synergy where we all rise together. So it's German and European having the vision to think, this is the future. This is huge, and it saved Adidas. 1986, hip hop gets its first #1 album in the States. Before this, it's underground, it's building, it's percolating, it's getting more and more people are thinking, that's ultra cool. So 86, the Adidas Run DMC deal, and the first hip hop #1 album. It came about through Russell Simmons networking. Early in his career, he met a student in New York. And the student loved music, loved Led Zeppelin, loved rock music. And he's totally open to hip hop. He thinks this is cool. His dorm room in New York became the office for his collaboration with Russell Simmons. And he went on to be one of the most successful people in the music industry. But at this time, he's a student in NYU. He's got a beard. He's Jewish, white, and his name is Rick Rubin. And he goes on to produce the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Slayer, Shakira, the Dixie Chicks. He goes on to be the head of one of the Sony record labels as well. So incredibly successful. But it starts with him meeting Russell Simmons, and the two of them form something that becomes huge. Simmons recalls that Rubin's approach was to create the drama, to make the theatrics. And you can see that in his work with Slayer. You know, it's about hell. Walls dripping with blood. Like, it's very, very graphic. It's a horror film put into guitar music. And the way to do this in the mid-80s was to equate the promotion of rappers with wrestling. And that this was the marketing vision for hip-hop becoming mainstream. For Simmons, this was a license to rude word, F being acceptable. Take that ghetto attitude and shove it down their throat. And I don't know, genuinely, how many of you would count yourselves as hip-hop fans if every hip-hop song had the lyrics, baby, I love you and I really respect you. And I hope we're together forever. You know, the whole thrust of gangster rap in particular, but also even outside of gangster rap, the aspiration, the in-your-face, the directness, the provocative nature of hip-hop comes, you can see it encapsulated in this very idea that hip-hop should be like WWF. You know, it should be cartoon with danger, a cartoon that could kill you, is how wrestling is sold. And hip-hop borrowed from that. That was the template. And we're going back in time now. To John Diamond, performs Fubu. And here's LL Cool J. I showed you the ad with the guy from The Clash and Betty Boo. And then the Gap thought, you know who would be really, really cool and would make our shop look really cool? A rapper. What rapper could we get? LL Cool J. So LL Cool J does one of the ads for the Gap. You get paid a load of money. One of my friends was asked to do the ad and did it, and funded a number of projects based on what he got. And they gave him a load of free clothes as well that he gave away. LL Cool J did a bit of rapping in the ad for the Gap. The Gap was formed in 1969 to appeal to young people, and 20 years later, still to today, it's doing that. But LL Cool J did one of the coolest things that I've ever seen in an ad. He's in the ad for the Gap, and he sneaks in a mention of a different company. So he's getting paid by the Gap, but he uses the Gap ad to advertise a different company's product. It's genius and rebellious. And the company is FUBU. So let's write down what FUBU stands for. Because it was an early black fashion business that crosses over with music. And FUBU stands for us, by us. So it's a real statement of black power, black pride. We can do business. And I think you can trace the mindset of Jay-Z, of every hip-hop entrepreneur, every successful rapper, back to that idea. That we're coming out of a community, and we might appeal to people all over the world, but we don't forget where we came from. And so early hip-hop was absolutely advanced by fashion companies. And it really, hip-hop really helped these early ones. So FUBU, you've seen some of their merch, you've seen some of their really, really garish, bright, graffiti colours. And in there's the seeds that we still see in hip-hop. So we'll take our break there, and I'll see you back in 10 minutes. Thanks very much.